And most of these have to do with something to do with fencing. That's why we call it dimension, because there's going to have a length and they're going to have a width. Key things you need to know: 40 meters of fencing, rectangular area, which dimensions, largest area. 40 meters of fencing, rectangular area, which dimensions, largest area. You'll notice there is one number in the question. That is it. We're going to do this whole question with one little number. I'm going to start with the diagram. What shape should I draw?
Rectangle.
Now, I could use length and width, but I'm going to use x and y because we're used to parabolas having an x squared in it. If you want to use length and width, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just going to start with length and I'm going to start with my number, which is 40, and tell me what that represents in terms of this picture.
The total area.
Is it the area or is it the perimeter? Does the fence go inside or around something? So this is the perimeter. And the normal formula for perimeter of a rectangle is twice the width plus twice the length equals 40. Are you still with me? And I'm going to come to the right side for a second and actually start to work with what we're trying to find. We're trying to maximize the area, because largest means the same with max. So area I know for a rectangle is length times width, which in this case would be x times y. So this is what I want to find a parabola, and what I want to find is the vertex, because if I have the vertex, I have the map min. The problem is there's two different variables here. So what I'm going to do is go back to my perimeter, and I'm going to isolate the y. I'm going to get him by himself. So how do I get rid of a 2x?
Minus 2x.
And then how do I get rid of the coefficient of 2? So y comes out to be negative x plus 20. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the right, and I'm going to take out y, and I'm going to put in negative x plus 20. Do you remember the last unit last semester you did systems of equations? And there were 3 ways to solve a system of equation: graphing, elimination, substitution. Do those words sound familiar? That's what we have here, is we have a system of equation, because I have 1 equation, 2 equation. What I'm doing is substitution. I'm going to take y out. I'm going to put in what it's equal to. Okay, so keeping the x that's already there, all I'm doing is taking y out and putting in negative x plus 20. And I'm going to distribute to get rid of those brackets. So x times negative x is negative x squared. And x times 20 is 20x. What kind of equation did that give me? Quadratic. This is the way they're always going to work. Step number 1, you're going to start with the perimeter.
But isn't it 20x?
Thank you. You're always going to start with the perimeter. Then you're going to go to find an expression for the area. The problem is you're going to have a y. So you come back to this expression to isolate the y. You start with the perimeter. Then I went to the area. Then I came back over here to isolate y. Then I went back to the right to sub in the area. So it goes left, right, left, right.
Could you do it too if you isolate x?
You can. It's just we're used to having an x squared here, not a y squared. So because we're used to that is what I did. But yes. Hello.
If your class has not voted yet, it's time to bring them down.
Have they voted?
I did secondary.
We're all voted. Thanks.
Thank you.
Questions so far? Step number 5 will be the easiest because we've done it a bajillion times. That's going to be completing the square. Why do we want to complete the square? Because we need the vertex. Why do we need the vertex? Because we want the max or min. So walk me through. How do we complete the square? You got to factor out the negative. Confirm. Fill in the space. Offer of 400, I heard. Offer of 100, I heard? How do I balance it?
Take away 100 times -1.
So I've got a negative out front. I'm going to need a binomial squared.
Negative x minus 10. X minus 1.
And then I combine these two. And then I'm going to state the vertex.
Times 100.
Confirm so far. This is the most important thing in the question. Even though we're trying to find a max min, what we're trying to find are the dimensions. Whatever the first thing comes out to is whatever you called x. So we know that the first dimension of this is going to be 10 units. How do we find the other dimension?
Why isn't 100 the other dimension?
Because this is the area, the max area, which is not what they asked us for. Where does that come from?
What dimension would yield it?
So I've got x. How do I find the other dimension?
We need what by what?
X times 2 is 20, and that is
10 for each one.
So where do I find it from? So go back to your systems of equation. What's the very last step when you're doing substitution? You get an answer, and then what do you do with that answer? You plug it in where?
Oh, we plug it into 2x plus 2y equals 4.
Yeah, we go back to the thing we substituted. So the last step is we come back to the left. We're going to take out x and put in 10. Y equals 10. So the dimensions are? Do we have any units? So what does this 100 have to do with anything? Well, the question didn't ask us, but that's the max area. That's the largest parsable area we can get with 40 meters of fencing, which should make sense because if we take our dimensions, length times width, 10 times 10 is 100. That's where it's coming from. It's always going to work this way. The only things that are going to change are the number of sides that your fence has and the amount of fencing you're given in the question. Everything else will be exactly the same. So this 40 might be different, and the number of sides here might be different. Besides that, it's going to be the exact same steps every single time. Questions of that? I'm going to repeat the steps. We start by saying the perimeter. Then we go to the right and say the area. We're always going to have to find y, so we come back to the left, isolate y. We go back to the right, sub it in. Simplify, complete the square, get the vertex. The vertex will give us the x value. We go back to the left to get the y value. So we go left, right, left, right, left, right, left. Questions? Read to read number 2. Finally, Brody, the chicken example. It was the first one. It was the first one. Here's what we need. 80 meters of fencing instead of 40.
We're only doing 3 sides.
The fact he's building a pen, we assume a pen is what shape? Rectangular unless otherwise specified, so it's going to be a rectangle. We know that he can use his barn as one side. And we want what dimensions? Largest area. Okay, so I'm going to do it underneath so we can try to copy the steps and just change what's different for this question. Step number 1, I want to draw a diagram. Now, I don't necessarily want to do just a rectangle. I got to include the barn as well. So I'm going to do a top-down view. So if you were looking over this from an airplane, what shape would the barn be? Square, rectangle, we don't know, but some kind of building. And then the fence would come off of it. So the trick there is how many sides do we have? 3. And I'm going to call this one x and this one y, just like above. For this question, P is at 40 now. How much fencing do we have? 80. Now I'm going to come back to the right. I want an expression for the area. Area is still going to be length times width. The problem with that is I can't complete the square with xy. There's nothing I can do with that, so I come over here. We need to create an expression for the perimeter. Take a look at how many sides we have. We have 2 y's and 1 x.
2 y. Oh, yeah, because the thing's attached, right? Fair enough.
I want to get the y by itself in order to use substitution on the other side. How do I get rid of plus x? How do I get rid of the coefficient of 2? So I get negative a half x plus 40. Now I go back to the right. What am I going to do over here? Take y out and put in. Are you starting to see the similarities between the questions? What's the only thing that's different?
Now we have
The number
coefficient.
and the number of sides. That's the only thing that's going to be different. Okay, what do we do in this step?
Distribute.
Yes, and then complete the square. So x times a negative half x is negative half x squared. X times 40 is 40x. Factoring the negative half out. Now, if you're not going to do this on your calculator, be careful about dividing by a half. That's not the same as dividing by 2. So if you're going to use your calculator, make sure you bracket that fraction. But if you're going to do it by hand, it's not 40 divided by 2. It's 40 divided by negative a half. And sometimes,
Dividing by a half is equal to multiplying.
right, so sometimes it's helpful to see it, because then your brain see we're not dividing it by 2. How do we divide fractions?
By the reciprocal.
Okay, so if I take that negative a half and I flip it, what do we get?
2 over 1.
And what's 40 times negative 2? Okay, so I'm going to highlight that 80 just so when you look back, you see something was different there. It's really common to put 20 because your brain sees 40 and sees a half and it wants to multiply them. If you're going to use your calculator, no problem. Just make sure you're bracketing that fraction. Magic number. Offer of 1,600.
Yeah.
How do I balance it off?
Subtract 1,600.
No, oh yeah, and then multiply by a half.
Oh, yeah.
Negative a half.
So that would be negative 800? No, positive 800 because it's a negative half.
What are we adding there inside the bracket?
1,600.
Oh. Yeah. 80 divided by 2 squared.
X minus 40 is the binomial. Vertex.
40.
Which number is important to us? What does the 40 represent? What do I not have? How do I find y? I'm just going to squeeze it in because I don't want to have to turn over. I heard a little tiny 20 really quietly. Somebody want to confirm that 20?
Negative 20. It's negative 20 because it's negative 25.
Negative 20? Looking for confirmation on that. Positive 20 or negative 20?
Negative 20.
Fight it out.
How is it positive 20? Because you're multiplying by a negative a half. See? Look.
Yeah, and so it's negative 20 plus 40.
Oh, okay. I thought, sorry, my brain was a little behind.
the dimensions are? Forty what now? Do you see the similarities between the questions? Again, that's why the first one seems a little but the second one you're going to see when we do the third, it's the same thing every time. It's just the dimension's going to change, or sorry, the area is going to change and the number of sides. Read to read number 3. There's a lot of words in it.
Old McDonald. First thing I saw. Yeah, it's a bit of
What's important?
He needs to divide it into two areas. Parallel to two of its sides.
Mhm.
What dimensions would maximize it?
So until you've seen one, sometimes it's hard to visualize from the word what's going on. We're starting with a rectangle. And right now that's one space. What he wants to do is divide it into two spaces. So he's putting up a fence that's either parallel to the length or the width. It's completely your choice. I can draw it vertically or I can draw it horizontally. What would you like to agree upon?
Vertically.
Oh, I called that y last time, so I'll call that y. What does that do to our number of sides? 3 y's and 2 x's. So I'm going to jump right down to there. And 3 y's and 2 x's is equal to how much perimeter? Okay, what do I do after this?
Isolate the one.
negative 250 plus 200.
That's what I heard. Confirm it.
2 over 3 is equal to point, it's 6 repeating, right?
I'd leave it as a fraction, but either or.
If you were to make it a
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
But I wouldn't round off till the end, so I'd leave it as 0.6 repeating. Okay, what next? So look back to the first two, see if you can follow what we did next.
Equals something x.
Mm-hmm.
A equals x y. And then you go A equals x. And negative 2 or x equals 2.
Says the girl who complained vehemently about the first one.
I just complained. Negative 2x squared. Let's do it again.
What would you like to do next?
This is where you complete.
This is where you complete the square. Walk me through completing the square.
Factor the negative 2/3 out first.
Use your calc if you need to. If not, write it out so your brain sees what you're doing.
Yeah, 300.
Negative 200.
That sounds confirmed.
200 over 1 times 3 over 2 is 600. Because when you divide by fractions, I told you that you have to multiply.
Wow, that's a big number.
600 fencing is a lot, so it's going to be a big number.
22,500.
Kind of squished in there, but 22,500 confirmed. How do I balance him?
Times -250.
Jordan, did you just know that 150 squared was positive?
Okay, 15 squared.
What's square supposed to be? It's hard to tell what it is.
22,500.
Okay. See, so cramped in there.
How else was Egypt ever negative 2/3 x 150 squared plus 22,000? Negative 15,000.
But I heard negative, so I want to just confirm.
What are we confirming?
Somebody said negative, I said positive. Confirm 15,000.
I'm just assuming this is
Vertex.
150.
The dimensions are
Oh, it's going way too fast.
Negative 1. Is it negative 100?
No, negative 650 plus 100.
Wait, can you go through how we got 100?
who can go through how we got 100. So 2 times 150 is?
Oh, isn't it? Oh, and then plus 200. I didn't say the plus 200. I was thinking that was just negative 100. 100 plus 200.
Do you see the similarity between the 3 questions? Turn and talk. Turn to someone, tell them what step 1 is. They're going to tell you what step 2 is. You're going to tell them what step 3 is. They're going to tell you what step 4 is.